Someone joins the stream, and they're like, "This isn't Monster Survival Wilds. What the fuck?" I'm just gonna keep mispronouncing it.
I'm gonna listen to an EVE Online documentary if that's okay with you. This game is fucking cool.
Venture out into Nullsec to gather valuable resources from these unprotected systems.
Because you know what they did in EVE Online? I didn't know this. You know what they did? They had like this whole galaxy, right? And the players themselves, not the developers put this in place, but the players did. They put in like a space in the middle called Empire Space, and then the outside of it, the players made like their own factions. Like the factions in EVE Online were made by the players. Just organically.
And you said this was EVE Online? What is that game? Is that like an
like there's like star systems that you go, not like there's a cutscene of you going from planet to planet. It's literally space. That's it. Like you join coalitions. You can be in Empire Space and like, you know, kind of have a safe, comfortable living, or you can go into like the outer space, like the outer sections of space where all the like the frontier of it, and you can get more valuable stuff there. But there's also not even a mechanic in the game. Players themselves do mercenary work for each other.
Fuck.
Yeah, that's what I learned from this.
What they gathered. But with so many players traveling through Nullsec, a clear
Nullsec, that's what the outer rim is called.
Emerged, one that played into the fantasies of many science fiction enthusiasts. Piracy. Traveling together in small bands, pirates began roving the common lanes that miners and traders would take from Empire Space through Nullsec.
Like, it's like an actual, like...
To do so, pirates would...
There's, like, barely any NPCs. All the trade, all the mining, everything is done by players. Everything.
To do so, they would outfit their
like,
ship with
political parties, the economy, trade, everything.
Reduce their speed.
That's sick.
Nearly impossible to evade.
And you said it was like just pure open space too. Like, I think a Star Citizen or No Man's Sky one, I think is that, or Spore. Because Spore, weirdly enough, did that too.
It's massive, and it's one server too. It's one giant server. Just of millions of people, because that's how big it is.
This, however,
and it's crazy because this was made in like 2003.
Unfamiliar with combat.
Bruh.
Holy shit!
Did you see my health go from what it was to nothing? Did you see that shit?
No, I just fucking saw you die.
I need to go get the goat. Real quick. I forgot.
A player named Nightfreeze recounted their experience on their first trading run, shipping goods that they had bought with weeks worth of ISK. Quote, at the time, I naively believed that any security rating above 0.0 would be safe because nobody would be ballsy enough to dare provoke the wrath of the 5-0 in space. I turned out to be wrong. I knew that something was wrong when my ship started to beep and a red target lock cursor appeared in the horizon with the name Deathbringer. The beeping accelerated and a red square appeared around my ship. Since I hadn't even bothered trying to fight a training pirate yet, I had no idea what the heck was going on. He sent a message to me, 250k or die. I responded to him, okay, the sweat dripping down my armpits past my side and accumulating in a little puddle at the edge of my shirt. 5 or more seconds must have passed as I fumbled for the micro warp drive hotkey, and just as they started to warm up, the first missile slammed into my ship. The warp gate was 15,000 meters away. I had to be within 800 meters to pass through it, and I was currently flying at about 300 meters per second. A second missile exploded against the hull, bringing down my shields and tearing apart my hull. I knew that if one more missile hit me, my ship would be nothing more than space debris, and this who couldn't even spell death correctly would have access to all I had worked for. Come on, you fucking pieces of shit, I shouted at the monitor. My dog started to bark in the background, but I could barely hear it. The only thing that mattered was the gate, because I knew that if I had lost that cargo, all my week's worth of hard work and all my finely tuned bullshit would be down the drain. Whoosh! I hadn't used the micro-warp drive since the night before and forgot about just how powerful they were. I was now shooting toward the warp gate at 3.5 kilometers per second, and all Deathbringer had to account for his 2 expensive missiles was a trail of dust. If you're reading this right now, Death, I'd like to give you a hearty you. I arrived at the specified starbase in the Galente region, my ship battered and bruised, and my ego several sizes smaller. I sold the computer hardware for a total of 3.7 million credits. The hull repairs amounted to 100K. I felt my heart with my left hand. It was still pulsing rapidly, and the realization that I had netted 600,000 credits in 25 minutes, along with a healthy dose of action, sent it shooting up even further. I did several more trade routes that morning, and by 9 a.m., my credit count read 5,780,000 credits. End quote. No matter what tricks were discovered, however, piracy remained a lucrative trade due to the heavy traffic in the lanes used to haul ore. Because of the distances involved in transporting ore from Nullsec to Empire space and little safe way to store it during the process, a mining operation would often consist of 1 mining ship to pull the ore from the asteroids and 5 or more transport ships to haul it back to Empire space, all of which were easy targets. Soon, piracy was lucrative enough for the first pirate gangs to lay claim to territory in Nullsec. Outfitted with various combat ships, they moved into the most valuable star systems, seeking flighty mining and transport ships.
This sounds like lore of something, but no, this is just players. It's fucking crazy to me.
Minded players and perform one of the most feared and most obnoxious practices to those in Empire space: a gate camp. Essential for transit between systems, stargates also acted as choke points for players to exploit, as there only ever is one linking 2 systems together. And so, pirates would often wait at these combined ingress and egress points in low security space, waiting for unsuspecting players to appear and destroying their ship, sometimes before they could even load the new system. Eventually, CCP were forced to add auto.
We did like a cool animated like clash right there, but I lost the battle
for long stretches of time. In the months following the release of the issue of those who had bought factories for resale by a relative regular maintenance fee for it, relative to the amount of financial burden to speculators who weren't using them, leveraging the speculators to either begin producing ships or sell the factories to someone.
That's what I'm missing. For some reason, my armor, I don't have a
factories were serving
quick sheath. I'm like, why is it taking so long for me to pop my
been live for 3 months,
ability?
And already CCP was being forced to adjust their game to contend with the space game enthusiasts, notorious for exploiting any system that they could as a part of their fun, while simultaneously attempting to complete the systems that they had intended for the game. And these new systems promise to create even more unforeseen and perhaps unmanageable problems. Over the following months, the more adventurous corporations began to establish themselves in Nullsec, and already the diplomatic situations in different regions were developing in distinct ways. These early groups of players, typically no more than a few dozen people, would form the first alliances with one another to stave off competition, typically naming themselves after the region of space that they inhabited. In this early stage of the game, there was no way for players to officially lay claim to territory, but over a decade later, Andrew Groen would resurrect information that had largely been lost
I didn't do it right.
by trawling through long-abandoned forum threads and speaking with numerous leaders from the time, and by doing so, he managed to chart early Nullsec. To the southeast was the pirate nation of the Curse Alliance, who frequently warred with the rigid and authoritarian Stain Alliance. To the west and the north were the Fountain Alliance, the Coalition of Free Stars, and Venal Alliance, which boasted more democratic systems of governance between their constituent
I'm sorry, this shit is so cool to me that this happened.
To take and hold territory in Nullsec, most made their home in Empire space. Though maintaining a Nullsec presence was lucrative, it was also difficult and time-consuming, and for most, this was a distraction from the more specific activities which drew them to Eve. This also meant that much of the money within the player economy was held in Empire space, and so, even Nullsec powers would have to enter this safer territory and trade with the players there.
Dude, he's so big, I tried dashing in the opposite direction, I still hit him.
For the industrialists, trading with Empire space was not only efficient, but necessary. While the most valuable materials were in Nullsec, the basic materials required for all ships could only be found in Empire space. And so, it was impossible to maintain a Nullsec presence without some sort of supply line to High-Sec and Low-Sec. This meant that these two worlds of Eve, while in most ways separate, were fundamentally tied to one another. And while the flow of resources between the two was imperative, the most stark example of this interplay was illustrated in the mercenary corporations. There being widely in terms of background, these mercenaries would, and in this way, competitors could be weakened or eliminated without any fighting on the part of the buyer.
Damn, it lagged a bit.
Were eager to loan out their services for interstellar credits, but many of them were unaccustomed to attacking targets that fought back. And so, a niche began to develop.
Oh shit! Broke a 10 when it slammed in the ground.
Vulnerable targets, but engaging in proper fleet-based combat. As the demand increased, various new mercenary groups were beginning to form out of ragtag clusters of players who were more familiar with the praxis of combat than theory. But sometimes it was simply enough for a player to be familiar with combat to disrupt the supply lines of more economy-oriented corporations and allow their competitors to surpass them. Such aggression meant that most every corporation needed to be prepared for a fight, and so they began to learn the methods by which to defend themselves, along with hiring their own mercenaries to protect their ships, meaning that anyone paid to disrupt another corporation had to expect pushback. While miners often weren't familiar with the finer points of combat, many already had the most important equipment necessary to participate: a battleship. During this time, there were no ships dedicated to mining, and so, miners chose the ships with the most available high slots for mining lasers. A particular favorite was the Apocalypse, which boasted 8 high slots and a large capacitor. All the miners had to do was trade their mining equipment for weapons, and they were ready to defend themselves in a minimal fashion. What had once effectively been paid piracy was more and more becoming obsolete, and in its place was mercenary work. Among these early mercenaries were a few corporations that attracted attention. Unparalleled were the Masters of Ownage, or Mu, who had become infamous after their gate camp in Mara and Pasari that shut down trade in the north for weeks. But there were a few smaller corporations that were beginning to gain a reputation. Body Count Inc. This group, led by the charismatic Celine, was one of the first to dedicate all of their corporation's time to handling mercenary contracts, and while they accepted paltry sums to begin, their fees grew as both the demand for mercenaries and the demand for Body Count Inc. increased. But as mercenary corporations fought one another, there was a surprising effect. Since warfare never resulted in the permanent deaths of any of the players, it was possible to fight against particular enemies repeatedly, and As they did, they grew familiar with one another, especially those who could fight exceptionally well. Such exemplary pilots would sometimes impress their enemies so much that they would be invited to join those they had fought. And so, a core tenet of
now I have
EVE
a quick
Online was
cheese. Holy
discovered.
shit.
In the words
That's so
of
slow
Celine,
without it.
quote,
It feels wrong.
"The best way to recruit people is by shooting them." And so,
You said you did
the
get
best
it, though?
pilots in the game began to conclude
I got what I needed from him, and I need to
and
kill the
charge
goats.
hefty prices for their services. Prices
Is that like an
that
expedition thing?
corporations were more than willing to pay
Yeah,
in
that's what
this
I'm
doing
key
now.
moment in the history of the economy of EVE. During
I
the
see
production
now.
of the game,
I understand.
one of the envisioned roles in EVE Online was that of a trader, traveling from location to location in order to find places to buy goods low and sell high based on an asymmetry of information. Players would only be able to see the goods on offer in their current region, and then they would have to travel to the station where the good was being sold. But as players traded with one another and the player economy began to establish itself, the need for a centralized hub of commerce grew. In order to maximize visibility and convenience, many chose one particular system from which to base their trade: ULI. ULI was a natural choice, given that it was a high-security system with the maximum value of 1, meaning that trading there was remarkably safe. But more importantly, it resided at the precise center of Empire space, making a trip to ULI a reasonable distance, no matter where a player was. Soon, all manner of players were traveling to ULI in order to buy and sell goods, and almost anything could be purchased there. This posed a problem. So many players in a system taxed the game servers heavily, and if too many people began to use ULI as a trade hub, then the servers would be unable to accommodate them. But soon, an even greater existential threat to the game would appear.
Cocomelon.
Toward the end of 2003, the deal that CCP had made with its publishing companies was concluding, but Simon & Schuster had no intention of renewing the deal, and so they reached an agreement that would return the publishing rights to the game developer. And while they had no infrastructure or connections to print physical copies of the game, CCP had another plan. On December 3rd, 2003, CCP made an announcement on their website. Quote, "CCP, the developer of the highly acclaimed MMORPG title EVE Online, announced today that it has regained the publishing rights for the title worldwide and will start distributing it as a direct download from the internet. We are very pleased to be in a position where we can contribute equally to both development and publishing," says Iver Christiansen, CEO of CCP. "We have reached an agreement with Simon & Schuster Incorporated and Vivendi International regarding Canada and North America, as well as with Crucial Limited for Europe. We expect the downloadable version to increase global sales sharply. Our player base has been growing steadily since the launch of EVE Online in May. Our game servers are in good shape, and we are technically ready for much faster growth now," says Hilmar V. Pettersson, CCP's chief technical officer. The player community is a great source of new ideas for the future development of the game. EVE Online is an evolving, living game, and we can't wait to see how the players will react to some of the new stuff we will be adding in the future. End quote. But this optimism was undermined by the problems that ULI now presented. As mentioned previously, the game's server architecture was designed so that each region in the game world was managed by a different server. However, the newest processors at the time proved to be suboptimal for CCP's purposes, and so, even the latest CPU technologies wouldn't help to bolster their servers for the influx of players, specifically the growing population in ULI. Theoretically, this could have been solved by changing the regions that each server managed and perhaps utilizing a specific server for ULI, But with the volume of players that ULive threatened to host, not even a dedicated server for that star system would be enough. What's more, players were beginning to discover exploits that threatened their faith in the game to function as it was intended. On March 3rd, 2004, a corporation named Zombies Inc. descended upon ULive with a single Apocalypse battleship and a bevy of dedicated logistics ships, parking themselves near a